All right, good morning. My name is Samantha Mirabal, and let's see, is it working? It looks like it is. Okay, I don't think it will play back any sound. I'll close it just in case. All right, good morning. Again, my name is Samantha Mirabal. I hope this is showing up all right. And today we're going to be going through looking at what you need to do when you start off digitizing. So you're looking at a blank screen here. Now, what do we do? So what I've got is a few projects, one pretty simple, more like a red work type design, and we'll go through that to kind of show you how to get the art in, scale it, and how to work through planning out your project, okay? And then from there, we'll finish that one up so you can see, how to work with your starts and stops, rearrange stuff so you can efficiently get around the designs and so forth. And then we'll do a few other ones depending on how time permits and see how it goes from there. So when you're starting off digitizing, as everyone knows, digitizing really makes a big difference in a quality sew out. Bad in equals bad out. So I'm gonna put that away. There you go. So if you put in a good quality design that's laid out well, that optimizes your trims, that uses good color techniques, good underlay, all of that, you set yourself up for success so that when you go to your final sew out, it's less back and forth, less editing, because you've got all those good practices into the design. So let's start off. We've got a blank screen. Everyone actually has this design if you have Design Shop. So the artwork I'm going to go pull up, it's built in and it's actually installed. So whenever you get art from your customer, whether it's a vector-based art or a bitmap or raster-based art like a JPEG, bitmap, TIFF, you've got to get into the software so that we have something to work with. Okay, so from there, we're going to go File, Insert, and I'm going to scroll down, where this is. So on your C drive, you'll see there's a folder called Designs. So we're going to go into there. And within there, there's one called Graphics. If you happen to see nothing in this folder, look down here where it says Files of Type, and you'll want to go and change that. I usually just leave it at this top one, all embroidery/graphic files. That way, if I can open it within Design Shop, it'll be here. Okay, but if you want to just see graphics, you can change it to graphics. If you just want to see embroidery files, you can set it there. But I'm going to go ahead and say all embroidery and graphic files. And down here there's one that we're just going to work through. It's called tp.bmp. This is, like I said, a very simple design. Once you insert it, it puts it on your screen. You'll see it's non-selectable directly on, and that's because when we're digitizing, we're going to end up tracing the design. Okay, so from here, your first step should be get your art in and then scale it to whatever size you want. You're going to make different digitizing decisions based on the size of the element. I mean, if you think about something that's going on the back of a jacket, right? So that's going to be, 10 or 12 inch square on the back. You're going to do some things that might have looked just fine as a satin stitch on a left chest logo will have to be a fill stitch on the back. So it's important that you get at least close to your final size, mainly because it saves you work down the line if you go ahead and set it up to the right size to begin with. This one down here, you can see, in order to scale it, you select it over in your project view, and then down at your bottom, you'll see there's a width and a height. So if you want to change that, you can change your height, change your width. If you want to just scale it to fit a hoop, you can turn on your hoop and scale it to fit the hoops to suit your needs, whatever the case may be. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and scale it to there. So once you have your artwork in, now it's time to plan out how you want to do this. Part of efficient digitizing is going to be looking at what I call pathing. I'm sure there's other terms referred to it, but that's where you're going to pay attention to your starts and stops so that you can minimize your trims. Why is that important? I know a lot of people ask me, well, does it matter if it's going to save me a minute off my sew time? Well, if you're doing one or two, and that's all you're planning to make, yeah, okay, 2 minutes isn't going to save you a whole lot. But if you're doing production, let's say you've got a 500 shirt order, and you're going to be doing production on 500 shirts, 2 minutes, 500 shirts, that's 1,000 minutes. Now you're talking real money, real time, that by taking a little bit of effort and planning out your path along how you're digitizing, that's going to help make it more efficient. Your machine will stay running at high speed longer. You'll cut down your sewing times. There's a lot of benefits to pathing and thinking about the design flow as you go through it. So once we have it scaled, now we've got to plan out how we're going to want it to run. I can see all of this, all my design, every part of it is touching, right? It's all black lines touching. So there's no reason I can't get through this entire design without a single trim, okay? We're going to do this kind of like in a red work style. So one technique you can use to try to figure out your path, so where, let's say I'm going to start here. Now where do I go? Well, I can go around these top loops, right, and finish those up entirely. And for red work, I would say we're going to aim for having 3 pieces of thread at every location. So I can do a bean stitch and a walk normal and finish that up, because I never have to go back over them again, so I can finish them as I go. But if I'm going to go back over things again later, well, then that's where you've got to pay attention to whether you're using a normal, a retrace, or a bean, and so forth. So let's go ahead and just start working on it and can talk through it. So I'm going to start here, and I'm going to choose a walk input method, which is your top. I use the icons over here. So a walk input method is a single piece of thread that is just going to walk around. And you're going to choose where you want to start and use your left and right clicks to work around the shape. Now, your left clicks are straight points, right clicks are going to be your curved points. And you just want to approximate the art the best you can. If you're working on a corporate logo or something like that, zoom in, make sure that you're really matching their branding. I'm not going to worry too much about that here because this is just for demonstration purposes. So after I've done that, I hit enter. I just turn it on to 3D so we could see the stitches. And what you'll see here is we've got our walk normal that works around. The green circle is where it starts. The red X is where it ends. Why is that important to pay attention to? Well, it's important to know where you stop, because to minimize a trim, you always want to start near the previous where you ended, okay? So moving on with this design, I know I want to end up with 4 pieces of thread in every location, all right? So walk normal, that's creative 1. So I'm going to copy and paste that. So I just did a Control C and a Control V. So you can now see I have 2 segments over here. And then I'm just going to change this type over to a bean stitch. So I did that just in the dynamic property view up here. So now that's going to give me 1 stitch. That's going to give me 3 additional. So this entire top of the TP is all done with 4 pieces of thread now. Okay, so next part we're going to do is I'm going to do all the internal stuff, all right, because that's just where I'm going to head for now. All right, so we're going to go back to a walk input method, and this is just a regular walk normal, so it's 1 piece of thread. So I'm going to start near the propeller. So where this propeller, the white sticks right here, that is your visual cue of where the previous element ended. So as long as you start near that, then you know you're going to avoid a trim. Okay, so I'm going to go down to the bottom here and do a left click, just a straight line across. I'm going to hit enter. I want to go ahead and do these. So 2 ways to do it. I could just trace an arc and then do another and then back to get my 4. I'm going to show you how to split an element. So rather than paying attention to my start and stop, I'm just going to create the arc. Oops. Now if you don't click in the right spot like I did there, you hit backspace and that gets rid of your last click. All right, so I have an arc. Well, my start point for the arc is nowhere near that, so I'm going to zoom in down here and show you how we can split this apart so we can still get our 4 pieces of thread. So I'm going to put a point here and then use split element at selected point. So now I've got 2 halves of a circle, this half and that half. All right, so let's walk through it again. So I have my line coming down, it ends here. Now I'm going to go into this circle or this arc, so I need that to start here and end there. My next one, I'm going to need to redo that same one, so I'm going to copy and paste it. Right, so I'm going to change it to a start here, end here, and that's going back over what I just did. So I've got my walk normal down. I'm going to do a bean stitch back. And again, that's so that I can have overlapping here 4 threads. I've got my 1 thread down, copy, paste, and I'm going to change my start and stop. And now this is going to be a bean stitch. So you can keep on tracing all this stuff, but I always like to think just work smarter, not harder. So if we take this line we already drew, I can copy that one, paste it after this element, and change my start and stop. So to change my start and stop, if you haven't noticed what I'm doing, I select the element I want to change, and then I'm choosing the insert entry exit points here. And I click near the propeller. The first click is going to be your start. The second click is going to be your stop. All right. So what we have now is that entire segment that we just worked on is done. All right. So we're back at the top again. So now we can work on the next internal spot. So I'm going to go ahead and do a straight line down, and then go ahead and trace this part over here. All right. So again, left clicks are your straight points, which change directions or just give you straight lines. Your right clicks are the ones that give you the curves. So when I end here, that's my first line there. If you hit escape right after you draw something, it'll highlight it, so then you can use this fit, and it'll fit it to your screen. All right, so from here, again, rather than retracing it, I'm just going to copy, paste, and change my starts and stop. So I'm going to make the start down where the propeller is, stop at the top, and change it to a bean stitch. So now we're done with that. Now, a way to check your work. So we've been working through this, and we think it's all continuously digitized, no trims. You can always, right here where it says update auto tie and trims, if you click on that, it'll recalculate where the trims are, and if the trims appear in here, you know you need to go back and re-look at where your starts and stops are. So again, we'll start at the top. I'm going to go straight down to the bottom, copy, paste. So this exercise, as well as the sun and moon, which is in that same folder, are really good for just getting the hang of paying attention to your starts and stops and working your way through designs in an efficient manner. Okay, so we're going to change that to a bean. So I've got one and a bean stitch. Gives you 3 pieces of thread of how it's set up here with a bean of 3, and your walk gives you 1. All right, so now we're just going to go do down our border. So I know I'm going to have to trace the border later, so I'm just going to do a straight walk normal down. Oops, and I put that in the wrong spot, so we're going to move that. That should be at the end. All right, so I'm going to walk down, and now we're going to look at these zigzags going across. So again, start and click across my shape, just using my left clicks to get my straight lines. I'm going to copy and paste that again and change my start and stop, and then do another walk down. Now there are hotkeys you can use on the keyboard to toggle between things. I've gotten so attached to my icons up there, I've not made a habit to use the hotkeys. However, by going through them, you can actually speed up some of your work where you're not having to always go up and click on this specific icon up top. All right, so we're going to change this one to a bean, and I don't believe I changed that one to a bean, my walk back, so I'm going to change that to a bean. Okay, so we're at this point. So I think all we have left is the outline and this portion of the straight line here. So if you forget something like we did here, possibly, well, we can get it coming around this way, but if you want to do it at the same time you're doing here, you can click on this element, split it, do a line down and back, and just kind of insert it in your flow over here. I'm going to catch it on the back side, so I'll catch it when we get over here, so we'll still be all right. But we've ended right there, so we're got to work around the bottom now. So I'm going to use my walk input, trace it around, and if you ever have to undo points, so let's say you click wrong or in the wrong spot, don't hit escape. If you hit escape, you're going to have to start from the beginning of where you just started. You're going to want to hit the backspace button, because that will just get rid of your last click rather than getting rid of the entire element. All right, so you'll hit backspace and just keep on hitting backspace until you get the points gone that you want. All right, so I'm going to stop here, because that gets me to the line I need. So I'm going to do the same thing I did with those others. I'm going to do a line straight up, and then I'm going to copy and paste it, change it to a bean stitch, and then change my starts and stops. All right. So now literally that's all that's left is to finish around. So we're going to start here, and I should have stayed zoomed in. Oh well. You guys get the idea. All right. So we'll go up here. That ends it. So everywhere has 3 pieces of thread with one exception. Do you remember? This outside edge, we only did a walk normal all the way around. So that means to wrap this up, I need to go around the entire thing at least once with a bean stitch. So you can redraw it all or select the elements, copy and paste them. So I'm just going to go through and select the outer elements here. All right, so there they all are. I'm going to copy them. I'm going to click on the last element in my project view. Wherever you click, when you paste them, they're going to go in right under what you have clicked. So I'm going to paste them there, and then we're going to just resort them if need be. So I'm just checking the work now. So this is the one I pasted in. That's fine. So it's start near the propeller and down, start, end. So all when I'm looking at it, I'm just looking at the green circle to be in line with the propeller. So from there, those last elements just need to be a bean stitch. All right. So when you do that, now you're all set. You can turn off your artwork, and you've got a design that will redraw. Okay, and it's completely done as in a redwork style. Now, if you're going for a redwork look, stitch lengths a little bit longer tend to look kind of more hand done. So 20 to 25 would be what I'd suggest for there. But we got our artwork in, we scaled it to size, made a plan with how you're going to do it. If you're not comfortable with trying to figure out where your starts and stops are and how you're going to work around a design, print it out, grab yourself a pencil, anytime, and trace around. Anytime you pick up your pencil, that's going to be a trim. Okay? So when you're not working with bitmaps or things like this, let's say we have a vector file. All right? So vector files, I still insert. I don't like overwriting my original art. Not that it's going to. It saves it as an OFM or whatever you save it as. I always just got in a habit mainly to help prevent myself from overwriting actual designs. So within that same graphics folder, so it's on your C, Designs, Graphics, you'll have in here one called Melco Shield. Well, it's here somewhere. There we go. melcoshield.eps. It's a vector file. All right. So vector files are a little bit different from JPEGs or raster-based graphics because every element within it was actually drawn out already. Okay, so they do make your work a little bit easier. So with this, we have a lot of options on how we can go about digitizing this. All right, we can do we can do an auto-digitized way where you just straight out convert it. So if we do that, it'll do a conversion. I just clicked on this icon, which is now grayed out. So the thing with conversions, I like to think of them as tools, right? It'll get you quick and close, but if you spend a little bit of time double checking it, editing it, you'll get sew outs that are, I don't know, they to me look nicer, all right, in the end. So for instance, this one, I just did a straight conversion. So what would we change? Well, I'm going to turn everything off so we can actually see them. And let's look at it element by element. So this fill down here, you can see it's got a nice underlay. It's got stitching. It's, you know, reasonable. But my stitch direction, I can tell with this dotted line here, is running left to right. So if we select the shape, select on the insert stitch direction, we can go change the stitch direction to be something else. Straight side to stride and straight up and down for fills tend to pull and pucker and just cause you more problems. So I always like putting a little bit better angle on them all. So we're going to start there and keep on going through it. So the first one, I change the stitch direction. I'm going to do the same thing with this one, get it off of a horizontal stitch direction. And I know this top part's going to have text on top of it. So rather than just eyeballing it, I'm going to come into the properties by double clicking on it and changing the stitch angle to something that, you know, somewhere between 40 and 65. Most lettering tends to look good on that. So I'll set it at 60. So now we've got this top done. For the shield part, I'm going to turn these off so maybe it's easier to see. Notice we've got a nice satin stitch kind of in some spots, and then it goes to this fill, and it's fill along there. Well, if you click on it, you can see it's got one single stitch direction, which is why it's doing that. So if we come, again, click on the shape and then click on the insert stitch direction, we can make it look more, satin all the way around rather than a combination of it all by adding stitch directions around. So to add those, I'm just left clicking and dragging, and it will drop a stitch direction in. The fewer you add in general, the better. It allows the stitches to sweep around uniformly, but you want to keep on adding them until you get it to where you want them. All right, so I added a handful around, and now this is a nice satin stitch all the way around. So it's doing an edge walk underlay. So this is using auto underlay. Remember, underlay is critically important for quality embroidery. And why is that? It's going to tie your fabric and your stabilizer together, and so that things don't move around as you're sewing. You can't get a nice embroidered item if everything's shifting on you, right? So you can prevent some of that by hooping well. So choosing good stabilizers, hooping well. The other part of it is doing the good digitizing techniques so that it's secured, it's held well. Edge walk can help really prevent the ability of anything moving in here, and it also gives you a nice foundation for the stitches to rest on, so that those top stitches coming over now have a nice piece of thread to sit on and not sink into the fabric. So it kind of crisps up your edges there. Okay. All right, so there's that part. Then we've got this black section, which again, black is hard to see, so I'm just going to change its color. Maybe there we go. I'm going to change its color just for the moment so we can see it. And looking at this one, the auto did a good job. It put splices in appropriate spots so that we get nice satin stitches all the way around. Looks good to me, so I'm going to leave that one. Now the Melco text, again, overall, it looks all right. I'm not a big fan of the density it has. It's personal preference, so I'm going to just come into the top stitching, turn off auto, and put the density, I don't know, maybe 3.7. Somewhere between 3.5 and 4.5 for most applications works decent. Okay, so that's a quick way, just using auto digitize, to be able to create things. And I messed up all the colors. Oh well, you guys get the idea. All right, now if we don't use the auto digitize, what if we just look at our vector? All right, so we've got a vector here, and the only difference between a vector shape like this and a filled area is going to be your stitch direction. So if you select on your vector, whichever one you want, click on Insert Stitch Direction, left click and drag, you can put it in there automatically. Okay, it will put the underlay as whatever your current defaults are on the shape. So, or on for the software, which I have set to auto underlay. So it auto everything, but you can turn those on and off and adjust them as needed. Okay, you can see where it gave it a start and stop. You can change those if needed. If I were going to do these the same gray, well, think about that. I might want to consider where my starts and stops are and change them to, again, optimize that trim so that you can avoid a trim between them. They're right next to each other, so there's no reason we can't do those. And you'll see this one starts there, it's ending there. That one's starting where this one is, ending somewhere over here. Okay, right about there. All right, so you can work through it in the same way. So select your shape, add a stitch direction. All right, so working with vectors can save you a whole lot of time. You still want to add a variety of element types, that you are not just using all fill, that you're using satin stitches, you're using detail work with, walks and columns and those sorts of things, because all of that adds interest to what you're working on, so that it's not just all flat. You can stitch something flat and it'll look all right, but then you can take a little bit of time to add some detail to it, even if it's all one color. By changing the element type, adding some stitch directions, you can really make it look a lot nicer as you go along. So when you're working on projects, get your art in, right? So we did that, we brought it in, size it. That would be your second step. Then plan out what you're doing, okay? Think about your colors. Are the colors going to be able to cover things up well? You're not going to want to run a whole bunch of travel stitches to get from spot to spot to spot on a design under a really, a black thread under a white thread. That's going to cover up later. It's not going to cover it up so well. So you want to think about, can the colors effectively cover what you're going to be running underneath it? Do the colors actually work? Especially if you're doing blends and things like that, you can plan them out on the computer and get pretty good. But when you actually pick out the thread colors, go take them out in some natural light and look at them, because that's where you'll be able to really see if they're going to work together and how it all works. Okay, so again with the vector, add your stitch directions along here and add as few or as many as needed to get the stitches laying how you want. All right, now one thing you'll see here, I've got these a little bit potentially out of order, right? So you plan out the order you want things to sew, because right now this red border is on top of all that, but how the design's actually intended to be is the border kind of sticks out and it's layered up with that all the way in the back. So, you know, plan out the direction and the layering that you're working designs from back to front. Okay, you're changing the element type, you're paying attention to stitch direction. Always make sure you have knots and knots and underlay. They're really important. If you're using the new version of Design Shop V10, the new update, it defaults with your underlay and all those on, so that helps out some. Oops, I'm going to do that conversion real quick again, just so we have something to look at. So the very last thing is check how it's going to sew. See if it makes sense. Did you miss an underlay? So I like using this redraw to do that, just because I can make quick changes here before I even go to the machine. If I forgot to turn on underlay, there's no way I'm going to want to finish that out as a final sew out. So I'd change it up ahead of time. Okay, so I think that's primarily what I had. Is there questions? I don't know how to find them. I wonder. Let's see if I can find questions over here. So maybe. I don't know. All right. I think what I'd suggest is, if you've never worked with Design Shop, go play with it. There's a lot you can do with it. And, oh, I see comments. Let's see if there's any questions. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, Nate. I keep on calling knots instead of tie-offs. All right. I don't see any questions here. Anyhow, so taking time with your digitizing, making sure that you are paying attention to your pathing, that you've planned it out well, can really make a big difference in a quality sew out. You know, when you see a good design sew out, let's say you sew something and it's really magical, you love how it works, it's perfect on how you're sewing it, study it. What did they do? What type of underlay? What type of stitch type? How did they get around the design? Use it as kind of a study piece for you to build that kind of knowledge, so that the next time you work on something, you've got that in your head of what to start with next. All right. Any other questions? I hope this was somewhat helpful. I know we're going to try to do keep on with the Facebook Live. So, oh yeah, within, someone just posted the Earth Day BMP is a good one to start experimenting with. That's absolutely true, because on that one, you get to practice all your elements in one, right? So if you look at this design, again, that's also in your C Designs Graphics folder. If you look at this one, it's got a little bit of everything for you. So you've got some fill stitches. So this background, the treetops, my mountains. I could do the sun a whole series of ways, but so I can use my fill elements, which is this one for complex fill. I can then use the rays of my sun to get a handle of using my columns. I like column 1 predominantly, but you can use a column 1 or column 2 along here. All right, for all the rays, all your black is touching. So there's same thing we did with the TP. There's no reason you can't get around this entire black section without a single trim. So how would you do that? Well, you plan it out, print it out if you can't quite figure it. But I always like to, I usually start here and do a satin stitch across, do a walk input method over, walk over the mountain. So a satin over into the mountain, walk down. So you just keep on tracing your way around using a combination of your walk input tool and your columns to be able to navigate across there so that everywhere you put a walk, you know it's going to be covered up later. All right, so we've got columns that you can practice along here. With your sun, you can again do columns and then walks to do all the rays, a fill on top, or you can do even a complex fill on here or a unifill where you add splices along here so that you can still get the satin stitches for the rays, but a fill through here. And with the sun and that center part, you can even add distortion effects to make it look more rounded. So there's a lot of things you can do and practice with. And the key is practice. The more you do, the easier it becomes. I always like to point out the first design I ever did. It's kind of embarrassing, but true. First design I ever did, I took 7 hours doing it. I didn't bother trying to figure out anything. I just hacked at it until I thought it was good on the screen. Went and sewed it and went to sew it. It pretty much sewed horribly. It had no pull compensation. It had no underlay. I learned a lot. So from that and fixing it, again, it took me 7 hours to do it. When I did it again about a year ago, just to see how, it took me less than 15 minutes to do the whole design. So it gets easier the more you do it. That's the only reason I point that out. It gets easier. Practice, think about it, study your sew outs, look at it and see how it goes. All right. Well, I hope this was helpful for you. Are there any other questions? I don't see any over here. All right. Well, you guys have a great afternoon. And again, my name is Samantha. I will talk to you next time.